Excellent. Good morning, everybody. Well, it's good morning in Auckland anyway. 7 a.m. here in Auckland, New Zealand. I can see that we've got people from all over the world, so welcome. The UK, South Africa, Zimbabwe, Ireland, Hong Kong, Singapore, USA, UAE. Wow, what a global audience we have. So thank you all for joining us. My name is Scott Matheson. I'm the co-founder of Working in New Zealand, and you're very welcome. Kia ora. It's a beautiful winter's day here, and we've got some great panelists to tell you about how you can make the move to New Zealand. Obviously, there's a lot happening with COVID all around the world. The countries are dealing with it differently. New Zealand has certainly done well to this point, but everybody's asking, hey, when are the borders going to open? So we'll be covering that today. We'll be covering how you can get a visa, how you can get a job, and ultimately how you can get residency and end up being a citizen of New Zealand, because that is the aim for most people who are migrating. So I'm going to introduce you to our panelists who are based in Auckland and in the UK. First, I'll swing over to the UK and introduce you to Paul Goddard, who's been working with us for, almost 20 years. Paul, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, my name's Paul, and for those of you who know me, I know there's quite a few of our clients on here tonight, which is cool, and we're helping these guys make the move, and the rest of you can join them. But I made the move back in 2003 with my family. Just decided that I wanted a better lifestyle or a different lifestyle, and that there's a whole world out there, and so quite quickly narrowed down the choice of countries to New Zealand. And it wasn't an easy journey, but it was without a doubt the best thing that we've ever done in our life. And I can't wait to get back over there as well. But it's a pleasure right now being, over here in the UK at the moment, helping some of our clients who are over here, but helping people from all over the world. I've done 12, 13 calls today with people from America and Mexico and the UK and all over the place. I mean, the interest in moving to New Zealand right now is huge, even though there are border restrictions. But yeah, more than happy to help people.
Thanks, Paul. And I will note to our audience, Paul, that you are also a licensed immigration advisor. So you are licensed essentially to give immigration advice. For the audience, immigration is mandated and overseen by the New Zealand government. So by being a licensed immigration advisor, you have to abide by a code of conduct, which is all about protecting you, the individual, from scammers and all those sorts of people out there who try to take your money. So Paul is licensed, and which means that he can give advice. Only licensed immigration advisors and immigration lawyers are permitted legally to give immigration advice in New Zealand. Okay, thanks, Paul. A big part of moving to New Zealand, for those of you that don't know, is that in order to get a visa, you'll need a job. And Paul's going to describe that a little bit later. But part of who Working In is obviously about employment. And on the panel today, we have two of our employment specialists based here in Auckland, New Zealand. The first, who specialises in the healthcare market, but not only the healthcare market, but specialises in the healthcare market, is Jo Bradshaw, a migrant herself. Jo, welcome.
Good morning. Hi, everybody,
Morning.
or good evening. Yes, that's right, Scott. Thanks for the introduction. I moved to New Zealand in the year 2000, which feels like it's quite a long time ago now. Moved here from the UK and also live in Auckland, which is where our head office is based. And I've been with the Working In team on and off pretty much for 15 years. So they really are part of my DNA now, and helping migrants, helping people move to New Zealand is also part of my DNA. And as Scott said, my entire focus is on helping healthcare professionals to find a job in New Zealand, which I love doing.
Fantastic. And a point to note for those, and I can see that there are some healthcare workers on this webinar, and there may be people who have partners who are healthcare workers. The borders are open for most healthcare workers, and we are bringing in a lot of people, nurses, doctors, into New Zealand, and all that's required is the 2 weeks quarantine when they arrive. But we'll get onto that detail a little bit later. Our next employment specialist is in the engineering, construction, trades sector, but not exclusively that, but that's her specialisation. Hilary Bonham, a true blue Kiwi, based here in Auckland. Hilary, if you'd like to introduce yourself, please.
Well, thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. As Scott mentioned, my name's Hilary, and I'm the International Recruitment Manager across infrastructure. So that's across everything being engineering, construction, and trades. I specialise across those areas, but we do look after other industries, so not just in the engineering and healthcare space. I am based in Auckland, so in New Zealand's largest city, and I've worked for working in for a very long time too, very much like Joe. So we are very much a family. We're all in the same office, but Paul's over there in the UK, who we keep in touch with regularly. And I guess while there are a lot of changes happening around the world, New Zealand's still probably a place that many of you were looking at pre-COVID and potentially looking at now, now that things have changed. So it's still an amazing place to come to, and it's just going to probably take a little bit longer for some of you. So it's a really good time now to start talking with Paul and talking with us and helping you with your journey of moving to New Zealand.
Fantastic, thanks, Hilary. And look, I'm just going to make an apology because Naseem Lalazari, who's our Head of Immigration Services, was meant to be on this webinar. She's been on all the other webinars. Today she has a migraine, so but with Paul being a licensed immigration advisor, we'll be able to give you the same information and advice. And as I said, my name is Scott Matheson. I co-founded Working In about 20 years ago. Our passion is to help people come to New Zealand. We love New Zealand, and we love helping our employers find good people, good skilled people from around the world. We know the process is quite complex. We know that there's delays, that we know that there are unknowns in coming to New Zealand. But at the same time, we also know that there's some fundamentals that need doing by any person who wants to move to New Zealand. We're saying, find out if you're eligible to move and get started now. The further you up the queue, if you can't get through the border now, you will be able to in the future. And you really want to be as high up that, that pecking order as possible. So that's the introductions. I'm going to ask Paul a question, but just as a general oversight that I would normally ask Naseem to talk about is, what is the current situation here in terms of migration? Well, first and foremost, the demand for skilled people is phenomenal. Almost every employer that Joe or Hilary talks to on a daily basis is absolutely screaming out for skilled people. Industries are almost on their knees, like the horticultural industry and the hospitality industry and the early childhood industry, looking for skilled people. New Zealand has always relied on skilled migrants to fill in gaps in the labour force. And because our borders are closed, we haven't been able to supply our employers with the skilled people they need. And that's created a really big demand. Unemployment is below the level of pre-COVID. So that will give you an idea of the demand for skills here. I read recently that we're at full employment. Basically, anybody who's unemployed is unemployable. And so, in the local market here, people are just moving around, but we're not really getting much of an injection of new people from overseas. So what we're saying is get ready, because when the borders do open, there will be a phenomenal demand for skilled people. So when it comes to skills, that's probably the next topic. To get into New Zealand, you need a visa. To get a visa, you need a job. Paul Goddard has been helping people with this conundrum for well over a decade. Paul, can I hand over to you for you to explain this difficulty, this problem?
Yeah, the catch-22, as everyone refers to it, the situation that anyone on here who will know if they've looked at jobs listed in New Zealand, or they've tried to apply for a job offer that they've seen listed for New Zealand, is, usually straight away it will say at the bottom of the job advert, you need a visa to apply for this role, or something similar to that, or only people with a visa can apply. And it's like, well, hang on, I can't get a job offer because I haven't got a visa, and I can't get a visa because I haven't got a job offer. And that's a massive brick wall. That's the first huge hurdle that people see in front of them. And unfortunately, what most people do is they sort of deduce, well, I need a job. I can't do anything with the visa because I need a job. The only thing I can do is apply for jobs that I can see online. And it's the worst thing you can do. It's what most people do, and it's the worst thing you can do. The success rate is 2% or lower. And the reason is easy to understand, because if you put yourself in the employer's shoes, and if I'm an employer in New Zealand, or Scott's an employer in New Zealand, and we get your CV, we look at it, and as an employer, we would say, this person looks great, but they're not in New Zealand. I don't know if they're going to get here. I don't know when they're going to get here. I don't know if they can get here. I don't know what I need to do as an employer so they can get here. I don't know if they're going to stay when they get. There's this endless list of doubts and fears that are in the employer's mind. And the secret to getting a job offer in New Zealand, because I know everyone is always asking, what's the secret? How does this work? You know, there isn't a set way. You know, one way works for everyone. There's different ways, but the secret is you've got to remove the barriers that stop the employer moving forward. And unfortunately, your CV does not remove those barriers. So you've got to be doing more. You need an employment strategy. That's what we do for people. We provide an employment strategy, which is very much involving support as well. It's not just, oh, here you go, here's an email on how to get a job offer. It's actual support from people on the ground in New Zealand. And that's what makes a huge difference.
Thanks, Paul. Yeah, really well explained. So Joe, just to give an example of that from a healthcare perspective, number one, you know, what is the demand for healthcare workers in New Zealand right now? What are your employers saying? How do they view offshore talent? And what do you do to smooth the pathway to get people into employment? Can you just give a summary of what you do, please?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Well, I guess to answer your first question, Scott, in terms of the demand, yeah, supporting what you were saying before, yeah, some clients are screaming out for skills. And so I've got a network throughout New Zealand. There's 20 district health boards in New Zealand, and quite a significant number of private hospitals as well. On top of that, we've obviously got all our medical centres, or the primary health, as we call it, and then lots of private clinics and aged care facilities. So I'm well connected throughout the industry and very much in touch with what the needs of the market are. We've also got very specific contracts for some clients as well. For example, one of my hospitals that I work with, they need about 40 nurses. They're opening a couple of new operating theatres in 2022, 23. And so they need to start building those skills into their team. I've got another organisation that wants to hire 10 GPs through working in the next 12 months minimum. So, you know, the skills are definitely there. You know, as I say, working with a private hospital, looking for theatre nurses. And so, yes, definitely no concerns on that front. In terms of what I do to help you, the first thing we do is organise an initial consultation with me, and we, you know, go through your CV, talk about, you know, your background, talk about your motivation, and really just uncover everything so that I can then present you to an employer in a way that makes you of interest and can take priority from an employer. You know, they want to know when you're moving to New Zealand, you know, are you registered, or where are you at with your New Zealand registration? You know, I want to know where you want to live in New Zealand so that I can match you with a location that suits what you and your family may be into on the weekends, for example. So it's all about establishing a profile for you and understanding all those key sort of reasons. And then what I do is put together a plan, put together a strategy to find you a job. And that isn't, as Paul was saying, it's not about firing off your CV. It's about me having those relationships so that I can talk to the right people, put you forward to the decision makers at the right time, so that you can be considered in that hiring process. And then we give you full support on interviewing, interview preparation. We are following up the employers to move your application along, to make sure it progress, managing the job offer. And not only that, you know, once we've got your job offer, then we're assisting and supporting you in, you know, when you need to book your managed isolation. And obviously we then hand you over to visas to do your visa. And then when you arrive in New Zealand, we're still your support people. You know, only a couple of weeks ago, I drove an hour and a half to visit a couple of candidates, a couple of nurses that arrived in New Zealand a few months ago. And, you know, I'm their touch point, one of their touch points in New Zealand. And I consider it my job to continue that relationship and support you on that continued journey of your new life in New Zealand.
Thanks, Joe. And those two nurses, how are they going?
Well, actually, they're going really, really well. They're really happy. And one of them has actually only been in her role for 4 months now, and she's actually looking at applying for a promotion, so a more senior position. So we've been talking about that. So yeah, really good, really happy, and living by the beach and loving their new life.
That's great. Good story, isn't it? Especially in COVID times. We're going to get to Hilary in a moment. There's quite a few questions around construction and engineering, which is absolutely booming. But I think it's probably important, and thank you very much, Joe, for explaining that, you know, technology and job boards with high volume applications, it's just very difficult applying from offshore and being noticed. Especially when the perception of most New Zealand employers is that the borders are shut and we can't even look at international candidates. We know that that's not the case. Certain people are getting through on a case-by-case basis, but certainly, you know, you won't be able to get access to those employers via a job board, unfortunately. So I think it's important for those people who don't know to understand how the migration process works in terms of visas. Paul, being the licensed immigration advisor, basically can explain the difference between a work visa and then the residency visa and how that whole process works, so that ultimately you can come down here and gain residency and gain citizenship. Paul, can you just give us 2 minutes, please?
Yeah, so ultimately with the way the visas work, sorry there, Scott, I was just looking at all the questions.
That's all right. Yeah, keep the questions coming, by the way. If we can't answer them today online, real time, we'll answer them later. You know, feel free, ask whatever you like. Ask whatever you wish. Yeah.
Yeah, so many, Scott. So what you're saying there, what the basics of the immigration process?
Yeah, the work, just explain the work visa and the residency visa, and you know, so basically how people can actually obtain residency.
Yeah. So it's actually quite easy to understand as a process. It's just very difficult to do. So essentially, what New Zealand is saying to, you know, skilled people around the world, like the people who are on this webinar, and I should point out, we only work with highly skilled people. You know, we don't, you know, that's what New Zealand needs, and that's what we work with. So basically, if you're a skilled person and you can get a job offer in New Zealand that matches your skills, then that gives you the ability to apply for a visa. And you've got to meet other criteria at all, of course, by, you know, being in the right age limit. So 55 is the upper age limit for the main applicant. So as soon as you turn 56, then options can sort of close up. You've got to be fit and healthy, so no major health conditions. You've got to be of good character, so no major, you know, convictions or anything else that can trip you up. And this also applies to your family as well. You know, if you've got a family that you're moving with. But if you meet all that criteria and you're a skilled person and you can get a job offer that match those skills, you can then apply for a visa. Now, the first visa that you usually apply for is a temporary work visa, and they're usually processed very quickly. You know, they can be issued generally within 2 to 8 weeks of lodging. You know, of course, there can be delays, and COVID can mess that up a bit, but very quickly. And the reason they can be processed quickly is the employer wants you to start work. You know, and this is obviously when COVID isn't there, because that's what we're talking about. And that visa is issued quickly, and the rest of the family can move with you, or they can follow on behind. And then at the same time, if you meet the criteria, if you can reach the 160-point pass mark as the main applicant, you can also lodge the skilled migrant category residence visa, which is one residence visa for the whole family. And that can take 12 months, 18 months or so to be processed. There's a bit of a backlog at the moment. But basically you get the job offer, you move over on a temporary visa with the peace of mind that your residence visa is being processed in the background. And then within a couple of years of you being in New Zealand, your residence gets issued. That's how it works for most skilled people who want to make the move. The key is the job offer that unlocks it. But, visas are very important. You need to know what is your best route and what's the best visa option for you.
Yeah, and I'll just add that most work visas now being issued are 3-year temporary work visas. So it gives you plenty of time to lodge your residency application and get that approved during the lifespan of that work visa. But it doesn't even matter. Most people who come to the end of their work visa just simply renew it. And actually down here at Working In, we spend most of our days renewing visas for people who are onshore. Because prior to this, you could get 1-year work visas. So there's a lot of people renewing their 1-year work visas and turning them into 3. Okay, Paul, that explains it on a very basic level. Obviously, there's all sorts of permutations with visas, and like you say, so many tragic stories of people thinking that they're eligible and finding out that they're not because of a family member, a spouse or a child, or a past conviction, or so many different variables, isn't it, or qualifications. So, one of the things that we do is check all that out for you for a small fee, and basically find out how, that you're 100% eligible to move to New Zealand. It's a really important first step. Otherwise, you're spending a lot of time and a lot of money potentially going down an avenue that is not available to you. So we say, get that checked out first. We can help you with that. Paul can tell you about that a little bit later. And then you know for certain what you need to do and how to get down here, or across here, depending on where you are. Hilary, I know you've been talking to a lot of major employers in the infrastructure space recently, and I can see that there's diesel mechanics, engineers, all sorts of people on this webinar. Can you just give us an idea of the demand, which is phenomenal, but can you give us an idea of the demand? And I guess the same process that you go through as Joe with the healthcare, a little bit different, but similar.
Yeah, sure. So there definitely is a lot of issues here in this space at the moment. So the government signed off on a lot of key infrastructure projects. We didn't have enough skills in the country prior to COVID. So the problem is getting bigger and bigger. There's, I don't think that we've met, as Scott mentioned, any clients recently that aren't looking for people, and that's from the trades up to engineering, so across all disciplines within that area. And so it's kind of, I guess, a lot of them are worried about some of their projects starting, and I guess a lot of them are, lobbying with the government to try and find out how they can help with getting some of these borders to ease so some of these people can come in. The government signed off on about 60 key projects across the country, and there's a whole lot of other infrastructure projects happening. I work very closely with a lot of New Zealand's largest civil and construction companies, and we also work with engineering and design companies, so we kind of have the spectrum covered. And the feedback is just very much the same. So as soon as the borders ease, they are definitely going to be wanting to recruit. They are, as Paul mentioned earlier, getting inundated with CVs from offshore. So it's just not really the right time to be firing off your CV, because they don't know where you guys are at in the process. Are you looking at moving now or in the future, and what's your family situation? So that's really the bit where that Paul takes you through, and also the visa eligibility to make sure that you can get in the country. And then very similar to Joe, then we build a profile on you. So you meet with our recruitment team to make sure that you've got all the tools and information that you need around moving to New Zealand. And then again, we connect you with the right employers. So we spend time with you finding out where you want to be located, what sort of companies will suit you and your family, and then help through that journey. So very, very similar to healthcare. There are some barriers at the moment with the borders being shut, but we are getting some border exemptions through. So if you have got some great skills and a company can't find anyone else in New Zealand and we can make that key match with Immigration New Zealand, then there may be a chance we can get you in sooner than when the borders ease. But we are hearing good things from the government around that the ease is going to happen, and when it does happen, we will be here with you and being able to place you in a job.
Thanks, Hilary. Yeah, look, and in terms of those sort of easings we saw this week, the government announced that they will allow 300 teachers into the country from offshore. Now, 300 is not a lot. We're a small country, 5 million people, so that will certainly help. But I guess it shows more than anything that the government is listening to industries that are hurting, and little by little we'll see more and more people be able to come through. And I guess the general rule is the higher the skill, the higher your salary, the more unique your skill is, and whether it's needed in New Zealand and whether it's New Zealanders can do that job, the more likely you'll get a border exemption. But we've brought in close on 500 people now since April last year through border exemptions. So border exemptions do work. They do cost a lot. Sometimes the employer will meet that cost. But if if you do have some skills in the engineering, construction, finance space that is quite unique, or even in the IT space, then sing out, talk to Paul, and we may be able to look at your application now. If not, then get ready, because we can start. Hilary, for example, her one of the employees she spoke to yesterday was saying, "Look, can you start looking now in anticipation of the border opening?" So that's the mindset of people. If you send CVs, though, you just go into their system, you go into their database. Then we will contact you, the employer, 6 months later, and go, "Oh, look, here's a really good person from overseas that we're helping," and the employer will go, "Oh no, they're in our database. We don't want to see them." And so then we're stopped from being able to help you, and you just become a name in a massive database, and basically lost. So that's basically what Paul was saying at the beginning of the call. That's the danger of applying to jobs online. You're cutting off your options for the future. And it's a real issue. It is actually a real issue and makes it very, very difficult. So probably the biggest message that we'll be saying today is, hey, get your eligibility assessment, understand what your pathway is, what you might need to do in order to become eligible. And two, don't apply for jobs online, please. It really makes things very difficult in the future. So Paul, we've talked about this eligibility assessment. I'm very conscious of the time. Maybe this is a lunch break or an afternoon break, or you're wanting to go to bed, whatever it is. Paul, can you please give an update to us on how the eligibility assessment actually works? What are the costs? And you're offering like a 15-minute free call if anyone's got any sort of personal stuff they'd like to discuss with you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've posted that link a couple of times. It's there again now. That initial link is for a quick 15-minute call with me to clarify your options, to basically answer a few key questions that you might have about making the move, like some of the questions you've been typing in. Everyone's got lots and lots of questions, and that's the point. You can't move forward until you've got the answers to all the questions. You need a plan to be able to make this move. As we've just said, don't fire off CVs online. You can't apply for visas at the moment. There's all these things that you can't do. So what can you do? Well, the one thing you can do is you can get a clear plan and strategy on how to move to New Zealand. You can get the answers to all your questions about what it's like to live in New Zealand and where's the best city to live in based on your skills and what's it like. I've lived in New Zealand for 18 years, so I can give you those answers. We've helped thousands of people do it. You can get the answers around visas and timeframes and costs. It's only when you've got all that information that you can move forward with confidence. It's only when we've got all that information about you that we can move forward with confidence and help you, and that's the key. That initial call and assessment with me is absolutely crucial. It's you get a full assessment from our visa team over in New Zealand. I think there's what, 8 or 10 people in the visa team now, Scott. I keep losing track. The assessment by the visa team and the recruitment team, they'll generate a report which we then email to you, which clarifies all your options about moving. But the important part about that is you also get a consultation with me, and that consultation is usually around 45 minutes to an hour. And by the end of that call, you'll be crystal clear. These are my options. These are the steps I need to take. These are the hurdles I need to overcome. All the answers to all your questions, so that you then have got a clear plan on being able to make the move. But also, you've got access to us to help you make the move. The fee for that full assessment by the team and the full consultation with me is £150. That's per family. You know, so it's not per person. So it's £150. We do look at the whole family, and we don't just look at the one person who sent a CV through. And it's an absolute, you know, must. It's a must for you. It's a must for us. It's the one main thing that you can really do now. If you want to move forward, get the information about you and your move that's going to help you move forward. It's essential. Now, we know that some of you might be like, well, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm not quite sure. That's why I'm saying, if you're serious about making the move and you've got a few quick questions that you want answering, there's a free 15-minute call with me. Click the link that I've sent through. It doesn't cost you anything. I'll look at your details. I'll answer some of the questions that you've got. I'll then invite you to the full consultation, and then you can move forward with confidence.
Thanks, Paul. Look, I think we need to wrap up now. It's after 7:30 in New Zealand. We don't want to take up people's time. You know, one thing we will say is, you know, migration is a massive, massive part of anyone's life. It's a really big, brave move. Even just being on this webinar is a really brave move. But it has been done by thousands of people before you. It can be sticky, it can be tricky. COVID has made it demonstrably more challenging. And, you know, the immigration rules are changing all the time. But stick in there if you're really keen, because most people who come to New Zealand really enjoy being here. They're very, very satisfied with the move. And for whatever reason it is that you feel like migrating, you know, and you've got skills, you're definitely welcome here. As a business and as a company that helps people, it's what we do. We love it. We're real, we're genuine. We'll just tell you as it is. We're not going to give any false promises whatsoever. Our reputation wouldn't allow it. And also, of course, being licensed advisors, we've got to be squeaky clean as well. So you don't need to worry about any of that sort of stuff with us. But check us out online. You can look at all our testimonials and such and so forth. Look, I think we better wrap it up now. We could keep on talking all day about moving to New Zealand, and maybe you can join our next webinar or talk to Paul for 15 minutes about your personal stuff. In the meantime, I'm going to have to say goodbye. So thanks very much for joining us, and hopefully we can see you down in New Zealand. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.